Agent Scarlett, Agent Scarlett. She's the one who infiltrates the Ashikage, the ninja clan. She's a sergeant, Agent Scarlett. Grady 5 is on her file card. Clip it and save.
Hey, it's not me, Mark, it's Tim. Mark was called away on an urgent family matter and sends his regards, but we are going to Charlie Mike and have the episode we were going to do anyway. We've got a special guest. I am Tim Finn, normally the co-host of Talking Joe, and I'm happy to be driving this technical setup today. Joining me for just this one time is my co-host, someone you might remember from the first 126 episodes of Talking Joe, and from creating Talking Joe in the first place, it's Chief Stride.
Whoa, Nelly! Hello, Tim, and hello, listeners.
We're just going to get right into it. Hi, Chief. Great to see you back. We have had Chief on a few times since for some special episodes, and he has created a whole new life for himself with other podcast live stream things about pop culture. But we know he's out there absorbing G.I Joe content, and welcome back.
Happy to be here.
Joining us today is Kelly Thompson, aka 79 semifinalist, Eisner Award nominated writer for Best Continuing Series, Best Limited Series, Best New Series, Best Humor Publication, and Best Writer in the 2024 Eisner Awards. Kelly Thompson is known for writing another redheaded agent, Black Widow. Also at Marvel Comics, Thompson wrote a 50-issue run on Captain Marvel, Kate Bishop's adventures in Hawkeye and West Coast Avengers. She is the co-creator of A Particular Land Shark, starring in the It's Jeff specials. Other credits include Gem on the Holograms and creator-owned titles The Cull and Black Cloak. Current work includes Powerpuff Girls for Dynamite, I guess that's upcoming, Birds of Prey at DC, and a little book we will be talking about today. It's the start of year 2 of the Energon Universe with Scarlett. Let's welcome Kelly Thompson.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. That was a great intro, Tim. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Mark wrote it, and I slightly copy edited it. And now that I have read it, I can remove it from my monitor.
Well done to Mark. That's one of the better intros I've gotten. Really nice. Thank you.
Thanks. We also acknowledge that as a writer who spends time writing, there's also this expectation or hope that a comics person will also spend a lot of time doing interviews for various media outlets, big and small. And if you've been doing a lot of those recently, we acknowledge that perhaps this is your day off. Perhaps you might be writing right now a script for pay. And so we appreciate the time.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. It is true. Sunday would certainly not be a day off. I would be deep in the writing mines, and we'll go there as soon as we can finish.
I have a broad writing question, and Mark always likes to start with G.I Joe origin story. We're going to do that second. When you write, are you sitting at the same computer in the same room always? Do you go to cafes or public places to get out? Where and how do you write?
I do write in the same place every day, on the same laptop every day. I do have a desk and a desktop, but I hate my office chair. And my partner also works at home. And so I end up working in the living room, basically. The chair situation is more comfortable. It's very not cool and not what I want it to be. Like, you see photos of an incredible writing studio or some great, all these amazing dreams. And I'm so I'm just on the chaise in the living room with a tray table and a laptop. It just seems not cool, but it's the best for my back, it seems. And it's a way to stay focused. And because we both work from home, we'd be in the same little 8x10 space in the office. And so there's actually more privacy by me working in the living room and him working in the office. And so That's how we go. It is not glamorous. I dream very much. It's like one of my only goals in life at this point is to get like a modest little mid-century modern house where I can have my own office, whether it be an actual office desk or another chaise situation. I don't care. Just a room with a window where I could close a door. That's the dream.
Maybe that's the follow-up episode when we get you back on to discuss your new writing habitat.
Let's hope.
Will you attend the Eisner Awards in July of 2024 at Comic-Con International in San Diego?
No, which I feel terrible about. I hope we win. I hope all my books win. I hope all my collaborators win. It's really important to me. It matters to me a lot, but I just can't do the travel. I mean, honestly, I never imagined we'd get those nominations. It didn't even occur to me that I would need to be planning for that expensive trip, and I just didn't think about it. So yeah, here we are.
What is your G.I. Joe origin story? Where were you first exposed to the brand and how?
It was definitely the show when I was a kid. I'm old enough that they are part of my, baked into my, 80s nostalgia. Scarlett was, I've said this in a lot of interviews and it's a true fact. She was one of my first, like, I would say like entry level characters, that I really attached to in sort of geekdom. And like, I was at an age where I was discovering that I really liked a lot of more boy coded stuff more than other girls my age. I also liked girl stuff, but I was into action movies and action figures and violent cartoons and G.I. Joe and all of that stuff in Thundercats and all of that in a way that other girls I knew weren't really into. And so Scarlett was this incredible gateway drug character for me in that respect, because she was someone I could instantly connect to as far as like, having that POV character that allows you to better, more powerfully imprint on a property. Like, she totally worked for me.
When I was in 10th grade, there was an 11th grader, and she, the 11th grader, it turned out was a G.I. Joe fan. And I helped her get the first 15 issues of G.I. Joe. And I said, I was a little surprised because my cousin, a girl, liked ElfQuest, which sort of made sense to me. And girls in my class, liked Cabbage Patch Kids or Gem.
Yeah.
And I asked this 11th grader, what do you like about G.I. Joe? And she said, Scarlett.
Yeah.
I said, why? She said, she's just one of the guys.
Yeah.
Did you have a comic book store near you? Were you exposed to the G.I. Joe action figures in the 80s?
So I did not know anything about comic book stores until I was a teenager. My first exposure to comics were Archie Digests, which you could find in the grocery store checkout. I always feel like I'm whenever someone's like, whoa, would you put on your resume like you're a fast learner? I'd be like, no, I have many skills. I'm a slow learner. It takes me a long time to figure things out. I'm not someone you should drop into a scenario and just like, she'll figure it out. No, not for me. I excel at other things. That's not on the list. And I think that's part of the reason why I would read these Archie comics and I loved them, but I never thought to question, is there more of this kind of thing? Are there other of these books? Like, why are just these things in this? I never thought about it. I just appreciated them and loved them and thought they were super cool. Was always angry at my mother when she wouldn't let me get one. And that was it. And so it wasn't until many years later that I found comic shops. And that ended up being, even that we found, my brother and I, through the X-Men cartoon was sort of how that happened. So, but I wasn't super into action figures. I'm still not super into action figures. I like statue stuff more. I'm not that into the action figures, but I had two younger brothers and they had a ton of G.I. Joe stuff. So there was a little crossover in the toys because they were getting all that stuff. And then I was sort of engaging with some of it, but I was mostly in it for the cartoon. And because I didn't know the comics, I mean, I didn't even know those existed until many years after I had sort of fallen in love with the cartoon. So it was mostly cartoon for me in my youth. And then later, as an older geek, circling back, reading some of the famous comics, seeing movies much later, all that stuff. So that was sort of like how I engaged with it over the years.
So in terms of the exposure that you've just told us about there to G.I. Joe, where did the interest come from in terms of wanting to potentially explore a writing avenue?
So I always wanted to be a writer, almost as far back as I can remember. But it wasn't just that I wanted to write stories, because one of my early memories with writing is when I think I had to be about 6 because I was in first grade. So where I was writing the stories about these mermaid sisters. And I not only wrote the stories, but then I like wrote them all out all nice and like did a construction paper cover. And then I like cut out on the construction paper cover and drew a mermaid inside like a die cut cover. And I'm 6. So it wasn't just a
Any correlation to Black Cloak here at all?
right. And I mean, you finally get to write some mermaids, you go for it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I not only wanted to write stories, but I was interested in creating an object of quote unquote publishing, of forcing other people to read said object and feel a way about it. So I wanted that very early, and then there's a moment, I think in 4th grade, I was in an assembly where you had to like put the thing you wanted to do, I dream of, whatever, on a shirt, like one of those stupid projects. But I remember very clearly I drew a book on my shirt and put I wanted to be an author. So like it was always there, like coming out over and over again. But it wasn't until I rediscovered comics as a teenager that I realized, oh, that is that writing and art sort of merging I've been looking for all this time, where it's like shorter writing, not necessarily novels. It engages with these geek things I'm interested in, like G.I. Joes and superheroes and robots and all this cool action stuff. And it engages with the art in a way that feels more like cartoons to me, which was this thing I loved so much. So it was when I discovered comics as a teen, rediscovered them, I should say, that it started clicking together that was really something I had been looking for my whole life in a weird way, even though I'd already discovered it in Archie's long ago.
Cool.
I understand that Joshua Williamson recommended you as writer on this project, as the perfect writer. And then he found out that you loved the character of Scarlett. I'm assuming that sentence might cover in its entirety you getting the gig. But I'm interested in a broader sense of pitching, working with both Joshua Williamson and also editors at Skybound, and maybe also Daniel Warren Johnson and maybe Hasbro. Can you describe for us sort of the larger story and timeline of this?
Yeah, I think when I had been brought on to do it, but I hadn't submitted the pitch yet, we had like a writer's room, the mini writer's room with Joshua and Sean, and it was Jonathan Manning before it was Ben.
When you say Ben, you mean Ben Abernathy?
Ben Abernathy, the editor now, but he wasn't there yet, so it was Jonathan. And yeah, it was a really terrific, like not deep dive, but broad dive into what they were doing, what they were building, what they were setting up, what the directives needed to be as far as the pitch, and how far we could go, where we needed to pull back. It was really great. It was super effective. It taught me a lot very fast, which is good, because while I do know more than, I don't know, I felt like I had decent G.I. Joe knowledge coming in, but that needed to be beefed up. But my Transformers knowledge is very weak. So I felt like that whole writing room of like how it was all going to connect and their strategy of building it was really helpful. It was also a helpful moment to like, throw elbows and reach for pieces. I mean, I had already been thinking about the pitch and like what I wanted it to be. And knowing that they weren't going to like let Snake Eyes just be all over the Scarlett book, he was probably going to get his own story at some point. I knew that I couldn't really focus. My instinct was they were going to tell me I couldn't make him a focus of the book. And so I was looking at different things, and I thought the Arashikage still made a lot of sense for Scarlett. And I was looking for building these other relationships that would like make sense and really have a lot of emotional heft. And I landed on Jinx, and how that all tied into the Arashikage with Scarlett was really helpful. And I knew if we did that, we'd get Storm Shadow at some point. So, it was a little bit like finding out what everyone is doing and what everyone's trying to do, and then like throwing elbows to get some of the characters you wanted or some of the ideas. And then, then from there, I built the pitch, and I think on my pitch, I think I pushed a little too far, like taking Scarlett a little too far afield. And so I think Skybound wanted to roll it back just a little bit, which I was initially disappointed by. But the more we worked on it, the more I thought about it, I do think it was the better like meet in the middle, where you're sort of compromising on both ends to get the best version of the character, where we're pushing her forward and modernizing some things and like really trying to help her feel like a relatable real person in 2024, but we're not pushing her in such a direction that it feels like it's not the character anymore to people who are fans like me. I mean, I don't want it to not feel like Scarlett. I want it to feel like Scarlett. I want to do like one of the best Scarletts you've ever seen, so it's exciting.
So I guess that's quite a big challenge when you're writing your own creator-owned stuff and you've got the vision of where you think that whole big overarching story is going to go, with a project like this where there are other moving parts involved, other creators, potentially a bigger picture at the end of the line, maybe 2-3 years down the line, having to do a 5-issue mini. What are the main challenges there then to know where the overall story is going, or can you just be very self-contained?
Well, I think that's, in my opinion, I'm not speaking for Skybound, but in my opinion, this is the genius of building this universe in these character focused minis, because it allows you to get these characters that people really care about. And I do find that people care about characters over anything else. It allows you to get them onto the board, and the minis allow you to tell this story that stays really tightly focused on them and whatever issue they're specifically dealing with. But then there's all this other world building stuff that's just organically building out the world. I mean, I love the way Duke, started to develop this idea of that G.I. Joe. And so we can all like feel it happening, like a wave that's coming, right? And we tried to capture that somewhat in Scarlett too, because this is a person who is not a Joe yet. This is pre-Joe in her life, and she is searching for something different, something that like we as readers know that Joe's will fill for her, but like she's not there yet, and it is frustrating. And like, is she going to survive to the point where she can become a Joe? Like, she's putting herself in some really tough circumstances, and Jinx is already in some very tough circumstances. So
yes, she will survive is what my prediction is.
What if we have a twist, guys? I mean, no, I'm not killing. I'm not killing Scarlett. Let's be real.
I was surprised that Storm Shadow appeared so early, and Mark was surprised as well. Was this your idea that Storm Shadow would appear at the end of the first issue? Was this an editorial suggestion? No, save it for issue 2, or
I can't remember. I mean, we definitely like push back and forth on some of that stuff. Like, we're going to have to save that because we're going to need, you have to have something you're building towards. I think we felt, I hope that people take it as a sign of confidence that we put him in the first issue, because it means we're building toward some fun reveals and some really, really great action. And I think hopefully that, I know people are there for the cameos and the world building and all the crazy stuff that they know we're going to tease in these books, but like, I'm there for Scarlett, and I'm there for like this really emotionally underpinning this woman and showing how spectacular she is and like what a crossroads she's at. And so like the emotional stuff I really like, and I think the groundwork for that with the codes and with the relationship with Jinx, their sort of sisterhood, I think it's really powerful stuff that allows to stay focused and really give you a deep dive on this character and who she is, while also showing you all these other cool puzzle pieces and the possible ways they could fit together.
I see this very strong relationship between Scarlett and Jinx in this issue, in Scarlett's narration and also her actions in the opening scene, and then the flashbacks, and then Stalker's talking about their connection. And I note that you are also writing Birds of Prey, which is an all-female team book, and you have written books with female leads. G.I. Joe doesn't have a lot of history with two women having a very strong connection that we see or that motivates a story. And I wanted to ask you about, are there pairings of females in either your real life or in stories you have absorbed, TV, movies, novels, that you think of in comparison to the Scarlett Jinx relationship?
That's a good question, and I want to answer it, but I want to say something else too that I think you'll like, which is that it was sort of not until I started talking about Scarlett with podcasters like yourselves that I realized that part of the reason I designed the plot this way is because I was sort of trying to address my biggest issue with G.I. Joe growing up, which, for example, so I loved Scarlett. She was the first one I saw. She was the one I imprinted on. I was in. And then Lady J started showing up. And I fucking hated Lady J. And I didn't hate Lady J because she wasn't a good character. I mean, honestly, I didn't give her the time of day. I hated her because they switched her out for Scarlett. Like, you should have been able to have them both. I mean, any episode of Joe's has, 10 male G.I. Joes get a line or whatever. But the second another woman is on the board, we have to take the existing woman off the board. That is the kind of competitive bullshit, patriarchal bullshit that makes women compete with each other for shit that is not, man, it's not good. So I don't really like, it's not supposed to be like some huge G.I. Joe's the worst, they should have known. No, this happens all the time across all these media. It happens even now all the time. We see it. We still see lots of things that are like 5 dudes and a token woman. It happens all the time. So I didn't set out to fix that problem in my own book or whatever. I wasn't even thinking that. I do think I like stories about sisterhood. I'm very drawn to them. I respond to them. I like to show them. So it was not a surprise that I would reach them with this way. But I do think in retrospect, like making the Jinx and the Scarlett friendship a sort of underpinning of this miniseries is totally about me saying, I don't care that Scarlett's name on it. Let's put some other interesting female characters in it and let's build them up and build them out and like make them fantastic, because they are. So I can't remember the original question, but it literally, as we were sitting here, I realized that was sort of why I did it, was because of the Lady J of it all. You know,
this is a corrective.
Yeah, I wasn't conscious of it, but it completely makes sense now when I look at it. And the only reason I didn't use Lady J probably specifically was because I was doing Arashikaji and all of that thematically worked. But I also do really, really like Jinx. So it would have been hard not to reach for her. I really like that character.
I think Jinx is very much a fan favorite as well, Tim. Would you say a lot of people like Jinx? And,
yes,
you know, she's not had a terrific amount of page time in the comics.
Yeah.
But she did have a very different storyline in the IDW continuity of the Cobra miniseries, where she was, you know, one of my favorite Joe-based stories ever. So it's really nice to see her getting some page time here.
Yeah, that was the other thing. Like, how long before we get a Jinx mini? So, you know, I'm not saying the Scarlet mini is a stealth Jinx mini, but maybe it's slightly by the back half, it feels like a team up mini. Maybe I think issue 4, if it goes the way I hope it is, it feels very team up-y in a way that the other issues don't. So, which is fun, which is a fun twist of it.
I think Mark and I had noted when talking about the Duke miniseries that the first issue, it's a solo book, and by the 4th issue, it's kind of a team book.
Yeah,
he's got Baroness and a couple other Joes.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I probably threw you off by maybe not even answering the last question.
No,
do you want to go back? I realize I didn't do it now.
So sometimes when someone doesn't answer the question, that's a reasonable nudge to just keep moving and not to restate.
But it was about other pairings.
Yeah, are there strong women characters, strong women friendships in fiction or in your real life?
I do have some good. I'm very reclusive, so it's hard, but I feel like I have a few people that I connect to on like a really deep level where you don't have to do all the maintenance all the time. It's like we just sort of come back into each other's lives and it just works, and that's great, and I love that. And that's very good for me because I mostly work all the time and I'm very reclusive, and most of my colleagues are male, although I work with a surprising number of women. I don't know if that's an effort or there's a lot of cool women who work in comics, especially behind the scenes. So but I think, I mean, you know, Carol and Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, are like an incredible pairing. I mean, I think, if you've read my work at all, like I stealth turn on like solo titles into ensemble titles all the time, just because of like how I like to build a supporting cast and things like that. And I like dialogue. I'm interested. We're doing a lot less of that in this book, which has been a fun way to stretch, but I do like sort of witty banter among characters and like feeling the relationship in that way of like just how they interact. So I do tend to do a lot of that where I end up pulling more characters in. Black Widow by the second arc was very much Black Widow and Yelena. I think their dynamic is much more antagonistic. I mean, I think this is maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but it's not too plot heavy anything, so it's okay. No, and I think it's okay. I just like there's a lot of tension in the situation in the Scarlet book at first, right? Because we don't know. Like, yes, Jinx signaled to her, but her signal was don't follow me. Like, what is really going on here? She's stone cold in that scene when she sees her, but you would have to be if you're an undercover agent. So it's like very complicated about what it will be. And I think that's fun, but I think when it opens up, it might be different than the way people expect it to be because of how they have to play it in issues 2 and 3. By the time you build to maybe they're going to have a conversation in 4 that's less observed, like what is that going to be like? Like we're only seeing it from Scarlett's side, but like has she read all of this wrong? Like I think all that stuff is really fun, and I like digging into that.
You mentioned you like writing dialogue, and this book has a lot of action and less dialogue. Is there an alternate universe, or is there a slightly different version of this script in your head? The version with a little less action and a little more dialogue, and what is that like?
I think I don't write Scarlet similar to how I write Black Widow. I don't write either of them as like super sassy, like witty banter type of characters. I mean, they have brutal senses of humor and they have like a very sharp tongue, I think, because they're very smart, but they're not like cracking jokes all the time. I see them similarly in that respect. Like a lot of their world is internal because I think anyone who ever operates as a spy, your brain is probably just wired a little differently about what you show people at all times, right? How you're perceived. So I tend to think of her, and that's the other reason. I mean, that's the other reason I think of Black Widow. It's not because they're badasses with red hair. It's because they both have these spy backgrounds and they've done it differently. And I would say Black Widow has a hell of a lot more baggage on hers, but I think there are some similarities there that help us. And I think in a different pitch where Scarlett isn't undercover, yes, you get a very different look at her that feels probably more like the flashbacks where she's allowed to just be herself. But when she's on the job, she's on the job. So you're getting the shield, right? You're getting what's the face now because she's a spy, basically. I mean, right?
Yeah, yeah. From a creative point of view, is it correct in saying that you had written the script for issue 1 without knowing who the artist was going to be, Marco Ferrari? And then what's that? How's that process differ from where you would normally know who the artist is and you can play to their strengths? And in this situation, if it's correct that you didn't know who the artist was, do you have to temper your writing slightly? And then once you start seeing the art come in for issues 2 and onwards, do you then I'm going to tweak this a little bit to suit that style?
Yeah, I would say exactly that. I think I didn't know, at least for the bulk of issue 1, who would be drawing it.
And just to jump in there, were you able to make suggestions about who you would like to be paired with at all?
I usually am pretty involved, and I wasn't really that time. I think I only made color suggestions. I wasn't really familiar with Marco's work, and I was new at Skybound, so I wasn't pushing to like control the art or whatever. But it's one of those cases where I'm really glad that I didn't, because I do think Marco's art, the big benefit, I mean, yes, I changed the way I was writing some things and stuff like that, but I just think it changed the whole vibe of the book, changed because of his art. Because when I was first writing it, I was definitely coming at it a little more like cool, calm Bond, Mission Impossible vibes. I mean, Mission Impossible gets wild, of course, so does Bond. But you know what I mean? Like there's this veneer of we've
You
got
mean restrained?
yeah, it's more controlled, it's more restrained. There's this vibe of it's all very slick, right? But that's not really Marco. Marco's got a much wilder, energetic, like sort of frenetic style. Like there's a looseness to it that feels more emotional to me almost. In like, and I mean these as positive qualities that had an interesting effect on the script and the pitch, because it became a little, it felt suddenly my touchstone felt less like Bond and Mission Impossible and more like sort of John Wick or Kill Bill, or things that had a little more like intensity and like revenge vibes to it, which she's not on a revenge mission, but it is incredibly personal in the way revenge missions are. So I think that the energy he was bringing sort of changed the vibe, and I ended up pushing it much more that way too. Like, let's lean into it, because you shouldn't fight against it. You should try and take advantage of it. It's a great skill, right? To have that frenetic energy on the page like that. So I tried to cut loose as much as possible and let him sort of go wild. And yeah, I think it's had an interesting development on the book. And my favorite thing about it is I think it's much less like my Black Widow book that it maybe would have been with a different artist. If I'd had a different artist that was more similar to Elena, or just a more controlled, like precise kind of artist, we might have felt too similar to that Black Widow book. But I feel like this pushes us in a totally different way that I really like, and I hope, and people seem to be responding to. So a lot of credit to Marco for the tone, I think.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with his work prior to this book, but I'll definitely be seeking out some more of his work, because, like you said, the action was dynamic, but in those quieter moments around the home and stuff, I don't know, he seemed to be able to sort of pare it down and just make it
Yeah.
quite quiet, which was nice.
Kelly, you mentioned making color suggestions. I think this is Lee Lowridge's first time working on G.I. Joe. Can you talk about color suggestions?
So I felt like at the same time that we were getting sort of this more frenetic work from Marco, I was interested in a palette, and I was really glad everyone agreed. And I felt like we'd have a shot because Jordy was coloring Duke. And I feel like that was more the vibe I was interested in. Something with a flatter color, not like super high sheen or highly rendered. I just didn't feel like that was right for Scarlett or for Marco's stuff, quite honestly. I felt like something more pared back, where we could have scenes where it would be like all white ninja and white snow and just sprays of blood, and her hair, like, sometimes you don't get something pared down like that if you're doing high reflections on everything, and a lot of rendering and shadowing in faces and stuff. So we went with this more subdued. And one of the things I like about Lee's stuff personally is that it's a bit subtler, which I think, I'm not saying there's a feminine energy to that, but it does feel a little more maybe a little more nuanced in a way that I think talks to like a female agent a little bit, like just a little softer, a little more sort of less intensity right out of the gate, like a little more like warms up slowly kind of a thing. Like I feel like all those things feel like Scarlett in a great way.
So when you said suggestions about color, you're talking about approach, or maybe picking a color artist from the beginning. You're not referring to it got colored and then you had a change in mind for a scene or a panel.
Yeah, no. We Lee was on my list of
Okay.
colorists, yeah. And part of that was, I think, probably flat color and someone who can handle more like subtlety, and who's going to approach it, I don't want to say like watercolor, that's not really right. It's certainly not technically right, but like, a little softer, a little softness to it that sort of reflects what we're doing, and also the location, like, because most of the locations are Tokyo and the sort of Arashikage stronghold, other than that Monaco scene. And so, some softness in that. Like, we want those bright neons and those harsh tones of Tokyo, but you also want this softness of the Arashikage stronghold bathed in this, winter snow. Like, it's great.
Location wise, like you mentioned, a few places this is taking place. I've got my own personalized, custom bound Hawkeye volume that I've had done. It collects Hawkeye, West Coast, and the Generations. But set in the West Coast, you're best based in the West Coast of the USA. Is it easier or different to write from locations that you're familiar with and aware of when you're writing for things based in Tokyo or Themyscira or outer space? Does that present a different problem?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Outer space is a question mark, because I guess it depends on what your genre is. Themyscira, I've got no problem with. It's fucking fictional. It's great. Sorry, I don't know if I'm not supposed to cuss, but yeah, it's much harder. I hate writing about places I haven't been and I feel like an ignorant tourist about. I mean, I like it because I want to set things internationally, and you want that feel. Especially, you have to have it in a G.I Joe book. We go everywhere, but yeah, I constantly worry about stuff you're going to get wrong. I remember I had to set part of a Captain Marvel 2-parter in South America, and I got a bunch of people who were mad about some things, and I'm like, listen, I'm not saying my script was right. It might not have been, but also then there's a translation between my script to an artist, and then there's a translation between an artist to a colorist, and then we come back again, and like, maybe I try to clean up if I feel like something wasn't right from the script, which maybe wasn't right to what it should have been for Brazil anyway. I don't know. Like, so I definitely have anxiety about that stuff, and it's definitely a thing in G.I. Joe where you're like, oof, we got to be international travelers now. We got to go all over the globe, man. You can't run.
I think in 3 words, blame the editor. But also,
sorry, Ben.
the guy who's written the most G.I. Joe comics has famously invented a bunch of countries as stand-ins for other countries, and that's a way, like, I think we all know what Madripoor really is.
Yeah.
So I had wondered while reading this issue if there was a deeper connection between Scarlett and Jinx. And in looking over Mark's notes on this issue, he had the same reaction. And I wondered a third of the way into the comic, oh, maybe this is more than platonic. Maybe this is more than roommates or comrades in arms.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, I think that's me, because there aren't a lot of pairings of 2 women in stories where most of the characters are male, and that sort of ends up being like a default.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, they must be romantically connected. So just to confirm, Scarlett and Jinx are platonically very, very close.
Yeah, they're like sisters. I understand that people look at this, and like, some people want to look at it because they want to be mad about it, because they think you're doing a thing that they want to be mad at, and other people think maybe you're doing a thing that they're really excited about. So like, it's a very loaded thing. I'm not trying to play coy with either side. It's a platonic relationship. It's incredibly close. They're like sisters. These are women who would die for one another. And I understand that some people see that or hear that and go, well, so just make them kiss. And I'm like, but some relationships are just not like that, and it's okay. And it's hard to say that it's okay for some relationships to not be sexual and romantic. It's hard to say that because we don't have enough of them in comics. And like, I know that people who feel like there's too many of them feel like they're everywhere, but that's just because those things get highlighted in a lot of like a PR piece where someone, hey, this character is coming out, or this character has a boyfriend now, or whatever. Like, you see a lot of that stuff, and it gets strung up as like, oh my God, this is happening to every character, and nobody's safe, and nothing's canon, and all this stuff. But it's a very small percentage on the scheme of things. And so it's hard for me to look at fans who are desperate for more queer representation and go, they're not going to kiss. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. That's not the path for these characters. And I think that's for a lot of reasons. One of which is Scarlett's other half is one of the coolest, best characters in the entire franchise. And you'd be a fool if you want Scarlett to succeed to like cut that off at the pass before you even had a chance to explore anything. So I would never do that. I'd also really love to show an incredible relationship between two women that's platonic and that's sisterly. And it seemed like Scarlett might be a good person to do that with because she has a potential pairing that we all know is really beloved and really sort of rock solid. So I don't know what Skybound's plans are forever, but it was never my thought with Scarlett that a swing like that would be the right fit for her. It doesn't really feel like the character to me. It doesn't feel like the relationship. And I don't know. I understand we all want more, or most of us want more queer representation. That's really great. I'd like to see it too, but I don't think this is where it would have worked. And I hope people will find the beauty in what is there, because yeah, I do think that this friendship, like really powerful, true friendship, is really getting a rotten deal these days. But I understand why. It's completely natural for people to want really incredible close pairings like that to turn romantic, because we don't have enough representation across the board. And so people are reaching for it all the time. And ironically, I think that's the other frustrating part of that is people see people reaching for it all the time and they go, you want everyone to be gay. And they're like, well, yeah, can I just have some maybe? And then maybe we'll stop yelling about it all the time. I think ironically, it's a case where if we could give a little more, I think it would become less of a big deal because everyone would be a little more satisfied. I don't know.
Look, if Bruce Wayne would gladly lay his life down to save Dick Grayson every day of the week, why can't
Yeah.
for Scarlett and
There-
Jinx?
Yeah.
There are many Joes, males,
Yeah.
who would gladly lay their lives down for another Joe, a male.
Yeah.
And when I read those stories, and I'm not thinking,
Yeah.
kiss.
Yeah. Same.
I also note that G.I. Joe, though we think of this long running relationship between Snake Eyes and Scarlett as romantic and rock solid, the actual depiction of it as romantic is quite light,
Minimal.
you know,
it's minimal.
Like we think of Destro and Baroness, and it's like 85% of that is my dear Baroness and darling Destro, like 5 words. Like they've kissed on panel like twice.
It's very light.
And G.I. Joe is not very much about romance. It's really about, action and camaraderie.
It's not, but I desperately want to write after they get Snake Eyes out there, the Scarlet Snake Eyes team up book. Please let me write hijinks and romance.
You heard it here first, Talking Joe listeners. Kelly Thompson really wants to write a Jinx miniseries, and Skybound really wants to write a. In terms of mechanics, issue 1 of Scarlet was released just a few days ago. Have you written issue 5? Where is the team in the miniseries?
4, everyone's working on 4 and I'm working on 5. Everyone but me is on 4 right now.
Okay. Things
are a little tight, as they are usually by this point in the run, I'm sorry to say. But
This deep into the run, is there still quite a lot of back and forth with Skybound and Hasbro?
I hope we're running a little behind on this one, so I hope it's going to go easier. But there have been. It's not that it's been hard. I've actually had a really great relationship with Hasbro. I had a great relationship with them on Gem. It's gone really well on G.I. Joe. It just I've gotten used to not really having to do a lot of redrafts. I don't know if that's arrogance or just luck or what, but at this point, I don't do much beyond a revision 2, maybe. It happens. Sometimes you've got a disaster and you're like, oh God, I've got to fix all these things. It still can happen, but it's rare. And so it has been a little tricky building in a little extra time for, there's always going to be notes from the IP. Like you're always going to have a couple extra things you got to sort. And I've just am out of practice dealing with the IP. So we've been running a little slow because of that. I think that's been the only thing is it's just, there's drag on it. If I don't get a script in early enough to have that buffer time to go back and forth, then it can slow everyone down. So it's a bit of an issue, but minor at best.
And this doesn't have to be a question. This could just be a statement on my part. When comics writers need to revise a script, when artists have to redraw a panel or a page, they don't get paid for that additional pass.
No.
And of course, that's time that they had already budgeted to writing or drawing the next page or issue, or perhaps take a day off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go walk in the park.
Exactly. I mean, I wrote this one-shot thing for Marvel, and I really liked it. It was a 30-page thing. I really liked it. I turned it in, and I didn't say anything about it, but in my head, I was like, I really like this, but the back half is way too violent for this property. And the note came back and they were like, this is fantastic. And then he goes, I'm worried about all the killing in the back half. It's too violent. And I emailed back. I go, I agree with you 100%. I'll try to get you the revision ASAP. And like, so now all week I've been struggling to redo those 15 pages. Like, I know what it needs to be, but like, that's several hours of concentrated time to sit down and fix that. So, it's you're much happier if you can nail it in one and it goes off.
You heard it here first, Talking Joe listeners. The next It's Jeff special, rated T+, parental advisory, not for kids.
You're not as far off as you think.
There's a drastic. Gary Hurry's coloring lots of red in the second half of this one shot.
I'm sorry about the cough. You're not far off. I'll be honest.
I will note I own a comic book store, and we've had the two It's Jeff specials out since they each came out, sort of with the new books, and they just keep selling.
I love to hear that. Thank you so much.
We also have the poster, the folded poster that Marvel sent up in the window next to our door, and kids will stop, and grown-ups will point, and kids, I'll see a kid identifying a character, like, look, it's Captain America.
I love that. That feels like, honestly, truly, I mean, Jeff happened as sort of like an organic thing, but the way that we've been able to develop him, I feel like it's just Jeff, and then he just brings all these colorful characters into his world that people also like it's just a formula that just works. I love it. So it's great to hear that, honestly.
But it's like, okay, well, Jeff has this many appearances, and his second or third one is in that PG-13 R-rated Deadpool book.
Yeah.
And I understand, there's Batman for 4-year-olds, there's Batman for 10-year-olds, there's Batman for gritty 25 and up year olds, and any character now, this is fair game. But I have this asterisk floating over my shoulder if a grown-up is buying It's Jeff and they ask, where else can I get additional stories?
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of it.
Yeah.
That's sort of it.
Yeah. The West Coast Avengers is pretty reader friendly. Like the Deadpool though is definitely a question mark. Yeah. Well, we're hopefully doing a couple other little It's Jeff type of things that would be good in comic shops. I hope so. I mean, I just feel like they're leaving money on the table for everything we don't do now. I mean, right? It's ridiculous. Like, why isn't he a Funko Pop? Why isn't he a plush? Why, like, you should have all these things in your shop. I just feel like he would sell like gangbusters. Everyone loves him. It's great. And characters like that do have a short shelf life, in the sense that when they get astronomically popular like that so fast, they burn out fast too. So by just sitting on it, Marvel is risking jumping the shark, quite literally, right? Like
Chief, while I consult my notes, do you want to make a G.I Joe observation or ask a G.I Joe question?
Was there any concern coming in here about the reception of a Scarlett miniseries? Some of these IPs that have readerships that have kind of aged with the product and are now grown adults can sometimes be quite vocal about things they like, and more importantly, what they don't like about their beloved IPs. Was that ever a concern, or was it just like, I'm writing this and you're going to take what I give you?
Honestly, I didn't. Maybe naively, I just didn't really question Skybound at all. Like, if they think Scarlett's the character, I mean, I think there's a certain amount of just sort of PR to that, in that maybe you should get a female character out there sooner rather than later. But I do think that they've shown already through the characters that they're utilizing, like putting Baroness on the board so early, they're definitely trying to diversify as much as they can. I think, within that property, it's always hard when you've got a property that's got so many popular characters that are all like basically straight white guys, right? And then it's like you've got all these really cool diverse characters too, but like there's just so many of them. Like, how do you get through them to highlight them? So I'm sure that Scarlett, I'm sure some female character would have gotten shine in an early round. I'm glad it was Scarlett because she's my fave. And maybe being a writer of other spy redheads gave me an edge to get Scarlett over if they'd started with a Lady J book. I don't know. Would they be interested in me for Lady J? I'm not sure. But
I think overall the Energon universe has been received really well by the fans,
yeah,
and a lot of the man babies haven't had too much to complain about, so they've been getting good material. You can't complain when the
yeah,
material's good.
yeah, the
Well,
man
you
babies
can, but
really like Scarlett, right? I mean, just like me, the man babies like Scarlett. She's a sexy redhead. So I think you sort of accidentally end up serving two masters there. And then as long as the product is quality and doesn't talk down to either of them, maybe you keep them. I mean, I have to say I was shocked when the sales numbers were coming in that we were the best selling. I was like, what? Us? Like, man, the man babies really like Scarlett, and maybe they're willing to give me a chance. So that's good.
She goes from one sexy outfit to another
Yeah,
sexy
I
outfit
mean,
on pages 2 and 3, which both serves the story and also, that scene's sort of for everyone.
yeah, yeah.
I thought I had a question, and I was going to ask it two ways. Do you feel typecast writing comics with female leads? But then I thought that's sort of the wrong way to ask the question because it's such a complicated topic. So, how do you feel writing books almost exclusively, or exclusively, at least right now, this year, last year, with female leads?
It's like you said, it's complicated. I worry a lot about getting pigeonholed. Like, I think there's an Eisner sort of analogy we can make here, which is that I look at someone like James Tinian, who he can write anything, but he's really made his name in horror. Like, is there when you think of horror comics, James Tinian is like, I feel like 90% of the operating comics fandom, if you were like, who writes the most best horror comics, we would just all say James Tinian. He's nailed it. He's absolutely nailed it. It's incredible. And I look at someone who's doing that and I go, am I screwing up here by like the Eisner noms this year are for a all ages shark in a humor publication, a creator owned detective fantasy thing, sci-fi fantasy thing, with like really sort of cartoonish art, a high realistic kids Goonies type sliders adventure type of a thing, and Birds of Prey, like a female. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, how's anyone going to know what to get from me? These are all super different. But there's also similarities, like they all feature strong, interesting female characters, and Jeff, maybe Jeff's an asterisk to that. Although when his friends pop up, they tend to be cool female superheroes like Gwenpool and Kate Bishop and America Chavez. I think that it's a mix. I worry that I'm pigeonholing myself, but then I look at these other diverse ways I'm trying to diversify and it doesn't feel so bad. The bottom line is, even though I, like anyone, want the biggest name characters because you want the most impact, you want the most people to see your work, and Batman's really cool also. But I like female characters. I find myself organically reaching for them all the time. Like when it's time to use a new character, the ones I think of tend to be female. Like, I didn't deliberately leave men out of, well, I did deliberately leave men out of Birds of Prey Volume 1 because I knew we were going to Themyscira and they wouldn't be able to go. Well, I still used Green Arrow. I still found a way to use Green Arrow. But yeah, I mean, it's not hard to go make this team of females. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. How many do you want? A dozen? Like, I'm so excited about them. So it's a complicated thing. I think I used to feel more like I was getting handed all these female characters and I wanted a chance to do something different. But now I'm like, yeah, but if you give me my choice, those are the ones I'd pick. So it might not be good for my career, but it is good for my head and my heart. So, okay.
But you could also say Tinian writes all these horror books. He wouldn't write so many horror books unless he was good at them and they were well received. You want a war story, you get Garth Ennis on board. You want good female character storylines, you go to Kelly Thompson.
It's not terrible. It's not terrible.
And also, very quickly on a side note, when are we seeing volume 2 of the Cull, please? Now, next week, please.
I wish. We're talking about it. I'm trying to figure it out, but I think the earliest you'll see it is 2025.
Okay, you can't drop that ending on issue 5 and then leave me hanging.
I know. We did design it to end that way, but only after we realized we were only going to get 5 issues, and we were like, okay, how do we get this story to an end place that's going to be kick-ass and suggest more, but that can actually feel like a complete volume with a horrible twist at the end. So there's where we ended up.
Is this a place to remind our audience that when doing creator-owned books, there's a different inertia to start and continue, because creator-owned books are completely or to some extent self-funded, right? It's not like the Marvel or DC editor and machine isn't paying you to write and paying the artist to draw.
Yeah.
You are working until issue 2 or 3 comes out and you get paid for issue 1.
Basically. Yeah. It's really hard. Meredith and I, we had to push the start of Black Cloak back to August, and it's entirely due to schedule stuff. Usually the schedule stuff is my problem, but she's having trouble too. And we realized, in addition to just having some things that were going on, like health and family stuff that was setting us back, there was also just a psychological effect where when we were doing volume 1, we were both getting paid. I mean, from Substack, but now it's all back end. And so you're right. There's a whole psychological component, not only the psychological component of how you trick yourself into not working on something, but there's also just a practical thing. You got to pay rent, and the thing you're doing for Marvel that you turn in next week, it'll pay you next week. This thing you're trying to finish for Black Cloak, see your money in October, I guess. Right. So it's a real labor of love for creators. It's hard. And I would also say that things like doing G.I Joe is a great project that I'm having a terrific time doing. And it also helps hopefully keep me alive to do other things. So it all like fits together. It's like a tapestry, right?
As for writing female characters or writing sort of any book that's a book you'd be good at writing, maybe the challenge would be if Skybound comes along in the future and offers you something else related to G.I. Joe. It's like, do you want to write a Jinx miniseries? And then you'd have this challenge like, no, it's got to be Roadblock or it's got to be Tollbooth, the guy who drives that tank.
I did.
And because I really want to write more Jinx and I love that character, but they're allowing me to not continue. Anyway.
That was how I felt on Deadpool. That was the first book I got that wasn't like a female-led book. But, when it was time to do West Coast Avengers, it's not like I threw Kate Bishop out. I was, it was, in fairness, it was greenlit as sort of a spiritual successor to the Kate Bishop, the Hawkeye book. So she would have needed to be in it anyway. But even if she hadn't, I wouldn't have gotten rid of her. Like, it's just what I like, right? It's, you're drawn to the same things over and over, like stories of sisterhood. So you need female characters for that.
And Tim touched on a point there, if in terms of Skybound and the Energon Universe, you'd be happy continuing to tread some ground in this universe should the book arrive that you wanted to do, or would you even pitch for other stuff as well?
Yeah, I think I would, especially with, not to, like, I love working with Ben. If I can work with Ben some more, I mean, I was devastated when he left DC. The only good thing for me with losing him on Birds of Prey was knowing he was coming to Scarlett and I would get to work with him. And I was like, oh, great. So I would love to work with Ben again. I'd pitch anything for him. And I love working with Joshua. I love that he advocated so kindly for me to come in here and do this stuff with him. So I'd love to do more in that universe. But I do think, like, I'm also not I want to leave room for other voices too. Like it's the same way that people are always asking me if I think Transformers and Star Trek are the top two properties that I've been asked to do that I just always say no to. And it's not because I don't find them interesting or that I don't think they'd be a challenge, but I just think there are so many other writer geeks that's like their favorite thing ever. It's the same thing with like Doctor Who. I'm a waste. I'm not, can I become a fan? Sure. Am I already the super fan? No. Could I throw a rock and hit 50 comic book creators who would die to write a Star Trek book or a Transformers book? Yes. So like, let them take a shot at it. Right. I don't have to grab for everything. I'm not the greediest person on earth. I'm just like in the top 10%.
I'm gonna take my G.I Joe fan hat off and put on my Transformers hat and say, "Wait, you've been asked to write Transformers?"
Not for Energon Universe. I've been asked before. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm putting my G.I Joe. I think I'm putting my G.I Joe hat back on because I'm looking at the clock and it's about time that we wrap up. Chief, any last questions you want to ask of our guest, Kelly Thompson?
I don't think so. Just it's a good thrill for me because I'm a fan of your work. I wasn't expecting to be here today, so it's been good for me. So thanks for inviting me on, Tim.
You're welcome.
And just keep up the good work. That's about it.
Thanks. Kelly, where can people find you or follow you on the internet?
So as the continued breakdown of social media, the best place to find me is on Substack. I have a newsletter there. It's a good way to keep up with what I'm doing. It's 1979 semifinalist.substack. And there's like a free newsletter, comes out maybe twice a month, but there's also a paid version where you can get cool shit, access to comics. If you're into that, we don't have any new comics running right now, although there are comics. If you subscribed, you could read them all today. So it's a great place to go. I am on Blue Sky under Kelly Thompson. I'm on Twitter still under 79 semifinalist. I'm on Instagram. I don't know.
All the usual places.
Do the Substack. It's who knows what's going to happen with the rest of these things. That one I'm actually in control of. I mean, within reason.
We have mentioned many of your titles. Is there anything upcoming from you that you'd like to just promote one more time?
No, you guys did a great job. I'm very excited about the next issue of Birds of Prey. It's a dinosaur world issue with Javier Pina drawing it. It's gorgeous. And then after that, I guess it'll be August, is a Sophie Campbell drawn sort of like cartoony one that I'm very excited about, that issue. And there's a big announcement coming, I think in July, but it's too early to talk about that. And then, it's just Scarlett and some It's Jeff and Powerpuff Girls starting in July too. So.
That's dynamite, isn't it? The Powerpuff Girls. Yeah. I've seen that in the list. That looks interesting.
It'll be really fun.
And I did have one more question, but you've actually answered it in one of your previous statements. I was going to say, are we likely to see you in the UK for a Comic-Con? But you said you were a bit reclusive, so your answer is no.
Probably no. Although I have to say, if on my list of cons I would like to go to if I ever break out of my shell, Thought Bubble would probably be right at the top of the list.
Okay, that's the best one in the UK, so good choice.
Thank you.
Okay, so Chief, is this still accurate?
YouTube Armageddon, Twitter is for losers, Loft stuff, whatnot. Sounds about right, but you spelt whatnot wrong, but that's fine.
Okay. Maybe I can fix it. How do I spell whatnot?
What, WHAT.
Yeah.
Just then NOT.
He's trying to make it too British. Phonetic.
Yes. What not? I don't remember saying Twitter's for losers, but that's fine. We'll take it.
This sounds right. It sounds right.
Yeah.
Folks, you can find me at my G.I Joe blog, arealamericanbook.com, at my brick and mortar comic book store in Somerville, Massachusetts, Hub Comics, and with my creative partners in New York City at our YouTube channel at Atomic Ape. I would like to thank our Patreon backers, Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, Justin, and Rob. My brain is telling me that this list has been slightly updated since this ticker was typed out. So to our 3 or 4 newest Patreon backers who got mentioned in our last couple of episodes and are not getting mentioned right now, We'll say your names twice next time. Kelly Thompson, thank you so much. I'm going to imagine that writer's room that you referred to for the Energon Universe at the beginning of this episode was all of those writers and editors in your living room, on couches and chairs, and you taking notes with your laptop, sitting with good posture, because I think that's what writers' rooms are. I think that's everyone goes to someone's house.
Not anymore. Now they're on Zoom.
Right.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking it easy on me. You know, I was nervous.
No, you weren't. Come on.
I was a little nervous. I was like, wait, I'm going on the like G.I Joe podcast. I mean, is there going to be like a question?
We're putting that
question
in. You're
and
putting that
answer?
in. The G.I Joe podcast. You're putting that in.
So we're going to put a new quote on the website. The G.I Joe podcast. Kelly Thompson, Scarlett writer. At the end of each episode, Mark tees me up to sing a silly jingle, which is based on the 1988 television toy commercial jingles. How does it go? Well, we're all at a time.
Use the catchphrase, Tim, and that's us done. But remember,
nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast. Later.
I loved that
Very
so
good.
much. Can I tell you, you guys both have very good podcast voices. I'm very impressed.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's all the microphone.
It's all the microphones. Yeah.
Without the microphone, I sound like I've just been eating a helium balloon.
When all's said and done, you can catch us down the road because we've been talking Joe and we're all out of Joes. Laters.